I'm live on there. Let me see if I'm live here on Instagram. Go live. There we go. All right, guys. Welcome to Body Secrets, where my mission is to bring you guys in motivation and a ton to help you guys on your fitness and your fat loss journey. And today's episode talk a little bit about diet bias. And I think that it's very common for nutrition professionals, self included, to have an opinion about the best way to diet, best way to eat, the best nutrition is, and get so hung up in their philosophies and their beliefs and their opinions that they neglect to actually look at the benefits of maybe other dieting strategies out there. And one of the things that I'm really big about in people, that there isn't just one diet. There's not just one way that works. The one that works is the way that it's going to work for you. And that means taking a look at all of the different things in your life that affect your nutrition, find a nutrition plan into your life. And when it comes to diets in general, where you're trying to lose fat and optimize your hormones and your health, or you're just eat better, or you want to build some muscle, it can be really confusing to know diet to follow. And there's so much misinformation out there about the claim of what specific diets do. That today I actually want to simplify that for you, but give you guys a little bit of a different lens to look through, where we can actually pick some things from each of the different diet buckets and the types of diets out there, apply them in different situations throughout your day, throughout your week, throughout your year, and actually get more success, be able to sustain our results after fat loss, or lose fat if we're trying. And this is where my opinion is, you should be able to use a little bit of all these strategies. I mean, if I think back, well, paleo did kind of ruin me a little bit. I'm going to be quite honest, but there was a lot of good that I gained from following a paleo diet a long time. One of the things it didn't have was the flexibility, and that's what I diet buckets say that we're going to talk about. So when we think of buckets, I want you guys to think of like you've got like three lined up, and maybe in one bucket, I don't know, all rebels, and then in the other bucket you've got all blue marbles, and in the other you've got all marbles, whatever. And the goal is, maybe you're trying to create like a puzzle or something, right? And we want to be able to pull each of these buckets. And by doing that, you're actually going to find that even I don't believe in ever being fully committed to a diet, there are probably some principles of different diets that you can pull and use in different instances. So if you've been somebody who's been on a lot of diets, a lot of experiences that you actually use. There's an echo. Let me see what's going on. Thank you. Let me see. Heidi says there's an echo. I don't hear an echo. Hopefully it's longer there. Can you tell me if there's still an echo? See, if you're listening to me on Instagram, do you hear an echo? Let me try this, because I don't want there to be an echo. I'm gonna screw myself cast today, aren't I? Heidi, is there still an echo? Because Heidi's listening live. Can you tell me if there's still an echo, Heidi? Can you guys still hear an echo? Okay, that's better. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and I just turned off my microphone. I don't know why it wasn't working properly, but we're just going to go ahead and not use the microphone today. If there's no echo now, now I'm a little quiet. Well, I guess this episode is just going to be what it is. Hopefully it's going to go through okay. That's the good thing, I guess, about doing it live, is I do get some feedback. Hopefully you guys can all hear me okay. I don't even know where I left off. All right, so we're going to talk about the different diet buckets. And as I was saying, I think it's really easy. Oh, I know what I was saying. Sorry, this is what happens when you get distracted. Is that if you've been on a lot of different diets, you've got a lot of experience doing different things. you know what works in those diets that you can actually comply with and what things didn't really work well for you. And today I want to kind of show you how you can use some of those principles interchangeably. And I've basically categorized things into three different diet buckets, and I'm going to give you guys some pros and cons of each of these things. So, the first diet bucket that I'm going to go over is the most common one, which is restricting food groups. So, this is diets like back in the day, it might have been the Atkins diet, the paleo diet, where you're removing all grains, dairy, and legumes, the ketogenic diet, removing carbohydrates, carnivore diet, so we're just eating meat, the vegan diet, we're only eating vegetables and plants. There's a bunch of different other types of diets that really restrict foods. In fact, there's even supplement companies that push literally just drinking protein shakes and a protein bar for your meals. There's a lot of different ways to restrict your foods and limit what you're eating. Some diet plans are like only eat this and that for so long. Um, and there are some pros to these diets. Some of the pros is that because you have less food options, if you are in a place of like impulse eating, you know you've got like two options and it's like this or that. So you're likely not choosing the wrong thing if you're committed to the diet. If you're only eating animal protein every time you get hungry, you're reaching in the refrigerator looking for some kind of a protein. If you've only got three different types of food you can eat, you're literally only looking for those three different types of foods. So there's less flexibility in your foods, which can make it easier for making those food decisions. Even when you're going out to eat, if you know you're only eating carnivore, chances are when you look at the menu, you're looking for whatever has protein in it, and that's all you're eating. Okay. With these types of diets, you're not focusing on any kind of numbers per se. You're only looking at foods and you're not given the mental stress and pressure of like portions and things like that, which can be helpful for some people, especially if you are coming from a very processed diet. Chances of you overeating on a lot healthier options or just animal protein is going to be slim to none. So your caloric control will be a little bit easier. And then obviously the main thing is that often our food quality does improve. So when you're given a very restrictive diet, often these diets remove a lot of the refined carbohydrates and high sugar, high fat foods that you're consuming. And you're eating a lot more nutrient dense food. So you're eating a lot more animal protein, or maybe you're eating more plants. You're eating more nutrients in general. So those are some of the pros of these diets. I think that they can sometimes be very simple for people to follow in the beginning when they're overwhelmed by nutrition. And it just becomes a way for you guys to eat in a restrictive way without having to think so much about it. However, the cons of this are there's very little flexibility. Cravings typically are pretty high. It's really hard to incorporate, when you are trying to be able to go out socially and you want to be able to enjoy a couple of drinks or desserts or things like that. It can make it very difficult for you to know what to consume, or it ends up can sometimes even lead to some binge eating because you almost feel like, well, I'm following this diet, so I'm going to allow myself a quote unquote cheat meal. So it can kind of, also develop maybe like a negative relationship with food. You start to demonize foods. I think that this also is where a con is mentally how these diets affect you. A lot of people correlate like they've got to follow this diet in order to be healthy, when in reality, that's not the goal. The goal really is getting you eating more nutrient dense foods and controlling your calories. It's not the diet per se that's going to do that. So I think that one of the cons is that doesn't really educate people on what's actually helping to improve their health biomarkers and to improve their body composition. Some other pros, I think, to some of these diets is that there can also be sometimes we can see some improvement in things like gut health, blood sugar regulation and things like that, because they are limiting very much their refined sugar and carbohydrate intake, or refined carbohydrate and sugar intake in a big way. So that's one diet bucket, is like the food restriction. Another diet bucket is restricting your eating time. So like think about this like intermittent fasting. And there's multiple ways that people do this. You can see people that'll do like a 16-hour fast and an 8-hour window, and 12-hour, whatever. There's 12 and 12. There's all these different fasting times. There might be people that they fast for 2 or 3 days in a row. Um, Even restricting your eating windows without fasting. So people that follow a meal plan and they only allow themselves to eat 3 times a day, or 5 times a day, restricting your amount of food you're eating or a time of eating is another diet bucket. And there's actually a lot of pros to this. In fact, I do recommend people do keep to a routine eating schedule for the most part, where they're eating maybe 3 meals, 2 snacks, 3 meals, 1 snack, whatever works well for your appetite. But one of the pros of this style of eating is it's more structured. So there's not that, you're not just grabbing random things. Like if you're on a fast, you're like, well, I can't just have a handful of nuts or this or that. You're fasting at that point. Again, this compliance matters on these diets. It's easier to control calorie intake. If you're only allowing yourself to eat, for 8 hours of the day, it's a little bit easier for you to control your calorie intake than if you're just, eating, 12, 24 hours a day, whatever you feel like eating. And there's also less focus on eating and maybe a little bit easier meal planning, because if you're only eating 1 or 2 meals a day, it can make it a little easier for you to figure out what you're going to eat. There are a lot of cons to doing this in a more of a fasted or an intermittent fasting way. I think one, especially for women, the stress response from fasting is pretty high. And this can actually trigger some other issues with hormones, cortisol, and such. So I don't really recommend this for women that are, if they're doing like the longer fast. Now, structured eating times isn't necessarily a bad thing, but just going all day without eating or delaying eating can sometimes be off. This can actually sometimes mess up your circadian rhythm, especially people that are, eating more at night, not during the day. That's not always great for the digestive system and circadian rhythm. Like, our body is designed to like be up and moving during the day and then to relax at night. So when you're filling your body with a lot of food before bed, you're kind of giving it mixed signals. Now it could actually impact your sleep. So I think timing of these fasts can sometimes matter. It can trigger binges. This is, I'm going to be honest, I think for a lot of people, it's glorified binging. I don't want to eat small amounts of food. I'm going to eat one really large meal. There isn't any calorie control. So if you have a large enough appetite, I mean, I can easily smash 2,000 calories in a meal if I'm just eating crap food. There isn't any focus on what you should be eating on a fasted protocol. So you have to also look at dieting from a different perspective there. Again, we're going to talk about diet buckets. It's often hard to get enough protein on a time restricted eating diet, and it's not very flexible, so obviously if you are eating on your own schedule, that's fine. But like, what if your family wants to go out for dinner, this and that, and you're just going to sit there and like not eat because you're fasting? So it can be very like inflexible in that kinds of stuff. So your first diet bucket, you've got food restriction. Your second diet bucket, you've got your time restriction. And the third diet bucket I'm going to talk about is number restriction. And I'm not going to use calories as the word, and I'm going to explain why in a little bit. But for these types of diets, we're actually looking at numbers. We're looking at calories. We're looking at macros. Maybe we're looking at points, or we're looking at blocks. There's a system with numbers in place that are telling you that you have this much to eat, and you're eating by those numbers. And there's some benefits and cons to this that I'm going to go over. So pros are, if you're tracking correctly, this is the most effective way to lose weight. So at the end of the day, there is no guessing. If you're tracking correctly, you're logging everything, you're not missing things. This is going to be the most effective way to lose weight because you've got the most control over your diet. It has the most flexibility. So there's really no limits on food. You can eat whatever you want. So you can kind of learn, how to be more flexible with things. You can actually ensure you're getting enough nutrients when you're looking at, well, not all diets. We'll talk about where points can kind of go wrong. But it allows you to actually make sure that you're getting enough of the different types of nutrients because you're actually seeing what you're taking in. And it can actually help to improve your relationship with food because science doesn't lie. This is telling you, hey, if I eat this and I'm seeing this result, I can adjust things. So for those of you that have been on restrictive diets, this type of a diet plan might actually help you realize that specific foods aren't going to negatively impact you. Some of the cons is that there's a learning curve in the beginning. Obviously, you have to be more diligent on portion control. So you are using a food scale. You have to be honest in your food diary. So for some people, this can create some stress. You need to make sure that you are tracking everything. And I think the biggest con for this style of dieting is I put the IIFYM, what do they call it, acronym, if it fits your macros. But this can apply to Weight Watchers as well, point counting and stuff like that. If you're just eating food by numbers, you're missing a huge piece of the picture if you're not getting in the right types of nutrients. So the 3 diet buckets I'm going to review again. One last one is restriction by numbers. We've got restriction by foods, and we've got restrictions by time, okay, by eating windows. Now, when it comes to improving blood biomarkers and it comes to body recomposition, what I want you guys to understand, and when I say blood biomarkers, I'm looking at things like insulin sensitivity, blood sugar, cholesterol, all of those values that people look at when they go to the doctor and like, I got to change my diet. My cholesterol's high. When we're looking to make changes to our blood biomarkers and we're looking to make changes to our body composition, okay, what matters most is changes in body composition. So weight loss, fat loss. When you lose fat, when you have less body fat, those blood biomarkers are going to improve and your body composition is going to improve as well. So it's really important to understand that correlation isn't always causation. And while it is important to look at getting in enough nutrients, as long as you're getting in enough protein, enough fiber, and your calories are controlled, for the most part, it doesn't matter what diet you follow. And why I started each of these diet buckets with restriction is because it doesn't matter what diet you follow. In order for you to lose fat, you have got to create a calorie deficit. There has got to be calorie restriction involved. But the goal is to make that restriction not feel restrictive, which sounds kind of dumb, but that's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to find the easiest way to navigate creating a calorie deficit without feeling restricted by that. So it's kind of like putting yourself in jail without feeling like you're in jail. It's putting yourself in jail, but decorating the walls and putting some plants in and making yourself feel comfortable there, if that makes sense. And that's why I didn't want to go and sit here and say, oh, well, there's there's only one way, because there's not only one way. But we can pull from each of these different diets and be able to actually interchange some of these things and use them. Now, first and foremost, I am going to make the statement that what gets tracked can be changed. So with my approach to nutrition, I do look at food quality. I look at numbers. I look at fiber, protein, carbs, fats, and added sugars. I don't focus on added sugars too much, but if a person's not getting enough fiber and I see all their carbs are coming from, Starburst and jelly beans, I'm going to make a statement about it. But I look at food, I look at numbers. I don't look at precision. So I don't want my clients feeling like they have to eat by numbers. I care more about what do their meals look like? What do the balance look like? I look at what they're putting together and I'm like, this doesn't really look like it makes sense. So can you explain this to me? Sometimes they just don't know what they don't know, So a lot of people that are on low carb diets, like skip carbs at breakfast and lunch, and they're wondering why they're binging at night, because your body's depleted of energy all day, So I pull from a little bit of everything. Anyways, what I want to talk to you guys about with these different diet buckets is how how we can use these different diet buckets at different times. So, and that's why I started with saying the best way is a trackable way. So I do think that whatever diet strategy you're using, whether you are using more of a time restricted fashion, a food restriction fashion, or a numbers related fashion, you should be keeping some type of a tracking system where you know how much you're eating at specific times, or you're keeping a food diary and you're seeing how much you're eating every single day and every single week, because that's how you're going to be able to adjust things. If you know what's going in and you know what you're doing for activity, now we can make adjustments to things. So here's what I love to do when I talk about the diet buckets. All right. So when we're talking about the different ways to apply these things, let's think about things like you're traveling and you don't have as much control over the calories in your food because you're having to eat out every day. I really love in these situations pulling from the food restriction in terms of the food restriction diet bucket, or the restrictive dieting bucket, because if you're traveling not for pleasure, it's like for work or whatever, it's really easy to be like, you know what, I'm going to play it safe and I'm going to have veggies and protein. and I know I'm going to be safer if I do that. At the end of the day, that kinds of stuff can actually help you. You're getting in the nutrients, and then maybe you're filling in the gaps a little bit, right? So this is where pulling from a diet bucket like restrictive eating might help. If you're at like a barbecue and you don't want to get down the rabbit hole of just snacking on a bunch of chips, like you can gravitate towards protein and veggie based things and fill yourself up pretty good and maybe have a little bit of that stuff. So if you look at the diet bucket of, food restrictions, sometimes that diet bucket can really help you a ton. Even as I mentioned, if you're in an impulsive, you're really, really busy all day and you don't have time to be in your tracker to know where you're at, like go with the one that that likely you're going to need most of, which is protein and veggies. So it can really help you with that. Another thing I like to help people with is when it comes to social eating. So let's just say you have a big social dinner coming up and you're also on a fat loss plan and you want to be able to enjoy eating, but you also want to stay within your calorie budget. Fasting and or limiting your eating a little bit earlier in the day can help you a little bit if you are planning, so if you're like, all right, I want to be able to have about like 1,000 calories for dinner time, and you're just going to like maybe eat a little bit less during the day, saving some calories for the evening. That might allow you to be more flexible and still stay within your calorie budget. So it's not that fasting did anything magical for you. It just allowed you a little more calories at a time where you wanted to have more calories. And then another one is tracking. So tracking, I think, can work in all scenarios. If you're somebody who can, be pretty disciplined in terms of like taking a look at what you're putting on your plate and eyeballing things, tracking can be a great way to be flexible. And so let's just say, you get an invite and you want to go out and you want to have pizza. You can learn how to interchange your normal chicken breast, broccoli, sweet potato, and avocado for maybe a salad and some pizza and enjoy some flexibility there. Maybe you get stuck at work and you don't have time to go home and you're hungry and you got to take the kids to sports. You can stop, and get something from a fast food restaurant. You can get some Chick-fil-A and plug it in, and it allows you that flexibility to make adjustments, and you can see how that can play into your favor. So I think the main thing that I want you guys to get out of this is that there really isn't one diet that works for everybody, and there really shouldn't be a diet parameter, but we can pull a little something from all the different diet tactics out there and use some of those different things to build a nutrition plan that works for us. It's not about falling into a category, I think, where we get all into this like cult, right? Like if carnivore is a new cult, like hashtag carnivore, hashtag meat eater. Like you don't have to, I mean, I was the same way for years. I was like the paleo girl, but you don't have to get hung up in this like cult of like pushing a specific dietary protocol, but you can recognize that all different protocols do and can be used effectively in your nutrition program. I think the main thing is as I'm going to keep mentioning, is you've got to make sure that you have calorie restriction. And I think the easiest way to track calorie restriction is to track your food. So you should have a trackable system for tracking what you're eating, however that is. And if you're somebody that's looking to find a way to dial in your nutrition for fat loss and you want to be able to use a simple, flexible approach, you can join in on my Fat Loss Accelerator program. It is starting next week. Our first call is next Thursday. You still can take opportunity to get 50% off, allowing 6 more people entry at that rate. And that's pretty much it. That's what I got today, guys. Any questions on diet buckets? I'm going to look over at the chat. Nope. All right. Well, until our next episode, guys, I will talk to y'all soon.